Thanks for joining us for another episode of Boom and Bust. I'm Tony Clement, the host, and I'm here at the News Forum where all voices matter. Our guest today is Bradlee Whidden. He is the Canadian Federation of Independent Businesses Senior Policy Analyst. He just concluded research on Canada's business tax disadvantage vis-a-vis the United States. Welcome to Boom and Bust.
Thanks for having me, Tony.
Guess we'll start where we should start here. You did a CFIB analysis of the state of small business in Canada. Tell us what you found.
Well, we look at how much taxes a typical small and micro-sized business would pay in all Canadian provinces and 20 of the largest and most economically connected U.S. states to Canada. And those taxes cover everything from property taxes to payroll taxes to income taxes across all levels of government. And what we found is that the typical small business in Canada would pay about 23% more in taxes than its counterpart in the US. And it's not much better for the typical micro business, where they pay 20% more than their counterpart in the US. So to put that in perspective, for the small business, that's $374,000 in Canada and only about $304,000 in the United States.
Are there provinces where it's better or worse?
Both. I mean, it's very varied between provinces. On average, Canada is much worse than the US. But when we look at a province like Quebec, we found that that province has the highest tax burden, not only in Canada, but in all the North American jurisdictions that we analyzed. Saskatchewan and Manitoba on the Canadian side do better, but even their tax burden is still much higher than the American average.
And which U.S. states are better than other U.S. states?
Well, North Dakota, Texas, Florida, those states, they do extremely well because they actually don't have an income tax. So
Right.
business owners pay, in most cases, in many cases, no income tax to their state governments. Now, they still pay an income tax to the federal government, but that's definitely a big tax break. In terms of what U.S. states do the worst, that would be New York, Pennsylvania, Michigan, a lot of those northeastern U.S. states.
Right.
But even they do better. In quite a few Canadian provinces, particularly in the Atlantic and Quebec.
Gotcha. So give us a sense, let's drill down a little bit. What sort of factors do you think make for disadvantage here for small businesses? And secondly, has it gotten worse over the years?
Well, we predict that it's gonna start getting much worse, and the reason is because in the U.S. they just recently passed legislation that extends tax benefits that were originally supposed to expire in 2026, and this goes back to the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2018. That provided a lot of very advantageous tax benefits for small businesses. Those were set to expire next year. Now they've been made permanent and expanded. So starting next year, we expect this problem to only get worse. Um, the small business tax rate federally in Canada has not been lowered for many, many years. We think the time has come to lower that
Right.
to make sure Canada maintains its competitiveness with the US.
And other factors, you mentioned property taxes, I'm sure regulatory red tape, were those other things that you looked at?
Well, we didn't look at red tape because that's not a tax, but definitely on the top of business owners' minds, and that would be an interesting comparison to do in the future. But you're absolutely right. Property taxes were a factor here, and they vary wildly across different municipalities. But what we found, of course, is that the Canadian average is much worse than the American average. Payroll taxes are actually roughly equivalent. Canada's a little higher, but where the gap really is, and where you can really see it, is for property taxes and for income taxes.
So one of the conclusions has to be, I mean, there's a lot of talk right now about U.S. tariffs and the impact on small business, but what you're concluding and what your research proves is that's not the only issue. We've got some systemic issues here in Canada that have nothing to do with U.S. tariffs.
Well, the trade burden is absolutely a huge cost constraint for Canadian small businesses. But that's the thing, as you said, we can't control what the U.S. does. Unfortunately, it's been very devastating for many small business owners to deal with these tariffs. But what we can do here in Canada is control our tax burden, control our regulatory burden,
Mm.
and ensure that small business owners are competing on a level playing field, which they're not. So if we'd like to address the cost burden that comes with that trade war, we can start with taxes here at home.
Bradlee Whidden, Senior Policy Analyst, Canadian Federation of Independent Business. We're talking about small business tax burdens, the differential between Canada and the USA. Bradlee, we're going to take a brief break. We'll be back with you after these important messages.